in the case of the civil rights movement, we had racism embedded deeply, deeply in institutions in a way that was murderous, and not just you know. It wasn't a denial of access to one institution or to one, if you want to be sort of coldly rational about it, to a contract that the state enforces, marriage, and underwrites. It wasn't just a denial of access to that, although there was that in the Jim Crow South in terms of interracial marriage. It was a whole, it was the plethora of rights that we enjoy under the Constitution. And like I said, it extended to a regime of violence to enforce. Now, that's not to say that there isn't violence against gays in the United States, but it certainly isn't institutionalized the way, discrimination and violence against blacks was in the 50s and 60s, up through the 50s and 60s. So that's why my take on gay marriage is that, if gay marriage opponents want to win this debate, they're going to do it through shows like Will and Grace and Modern Family and arguments like Andrew Sullivan's. They're not going to, not only are they not going to be as successful in agitating for sort of quick, speedy fixes, national solutions, legal solutions, jurisprudential solutions. Not only are they not going to be as successful, but frankly, the scale of the problem doesn't call for things like that. And the only way that this is going to be done with the minimum of disharmony, discord, and ugliness is if it's done with all deliberate speed. I mean, that's kind of my grand spiel on the whole issue. I wonder what your take is on it.
Well, you raise some interesting points in terms of the problems of comparing gay marriage to civil rights. When I think about the two, I guess the comparison I tend to make is not to flat-out racial discrimination, but the way interracial relationships were treated by people, and frankly still are in some places, and just by some individuals. Because denying somebody services because of the color of their skin is a matter of flat-out hatred, I think, because of somebody's skin color. There's no reasonable explanation for that. I think the denial of services because a couple is interracial is also wrong, but it is tied back to more of a discomfort with the idea of that relationship than to a hatred of the people involved, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, I'm still just evolving this thought during our conversation. But to me, I think that's the closer comparison.
Well, here's what I would say that. I would say, I'm going to get a little lawyerly and freshman year philosophical on you, but I do think, leave to one side the debate about whether you're born homosexual or not. You can still say that being black is not a behavior, right? It's it's just it's what you are, who you are. Being homosexual or being in a gay relationship is a behavior. So I think in terms of, at least, we can talk about morally, but in a legal regime, I think there are just different standards for, so the problem that somebody has in, the 1940s with an interracial marriage stems from a problem somebody has with blackness per se, with being a black person. It's a function of that root problem. You might say that there are people who are not racist in other ways, but who oppose or are uncomfortable with interracial marriage. That could very well be true. I would have to think more about that. But that's different than somebody who's just saying, I don't think this class of behavior that you're engaged in conforms to my beliefs. I don't support it. I don't think it's moral. And so I'm not going to offer you my business services. Now, we might say that's ugly. We might say that's prejudicial. But there's a big leap between that's ugly and that's prejudicial, and we can wag our fingers at you. And exactly what you were talking about before, which is the conservatives' fear that people who don't sign up wholesale for this behavior, and forgive me if that sounds sort of cold and, rationalist about the whole thing, but people who don't sign up for that behavior being sort of told, get with the program, and you better open your hearts and minds to these sorts of relationships, or you're subject to actually material punishment, which is something that I think with good reason conservatives fear. So I think there's a difference there.
Yeah, I don't want to take us too far down a tangent here. I just would say that I disagree with defining a gay individual by their behavior. Obviously, a lot of things go into forming somebody's racial self-identity. But just looking at somebody from the outside, skin color is a big part of it, and physical characteristics. For somebody who's gay, just looking at them, you can't necessarily tell, but it, I think, informs a lot of their being, of who they are.